By now you've heard about the Disney workers, the folks that do the character performances and the parades. They've voted in California to unionize. And this is about 1,700 people that do this, mainly a lot of part-timers from my understanding, but 1,700 people, Disney performers and parade walkers voting to unionize. Now, the thing about this is these are the people that dress up as Snow White or Goofy, Mickey Mouse, et cetera. They walk around the park. They walk in the parades. They perform, plays and skits, and they interact with the public and so on. These folks are saying, hey, look, we got to do better here. We're working, mainly we're part-time. We have to work multiple jobs to make this, make a living in California. And Disney kind of penalizes us. If we don't leave our schedules wide open, which makes it impossible to have another job, we don't get scheduled enough. And then if we leave our schedules wide open, it seems to us that we don't get scheduled enough. There's kind of there's a lot of seems and feels like, a lot of kind of soft qualifying language in there. I'm not knocking these folks wanting better, so don't take this as this video is not an attack on that. But I want to talk a little bit about this situation and kind of a broader trend that I've been seeing amongst a certain strata of employment. And I want to talk even a little bit about minimum wage. Now, these Disney workers aren't necessarily making minimum. Often they're making a little bit more. I looked it up, and the average, according to ZipRecruiter, which I think might not be accurate, might be a little high, but according to ZipRecruiter, these people are making about $49,000 a year. It's about $23 an hour if you're working full time. Now, the thing is, they're not working full time necessarily. And I think ZipRecruiter's number's a little high. Did some kind of softer research, looked at things like Reddit posts where people are like, hey, I worked as Goofy for a number of years. I made $18 an hour. So I would imagine the average is somewhere around, $21 to $23, $22 an hour that these folks are making. And they're saying, look, we need better. I can't make it in California. Now, one of the problems that they're up against is supply and demand. And, you're living in the epicenter of the acting world. I mean, everybody across America and from other countries want to go to where? They want to go to Hollywood, which is LA. So Disneyland, California is in Anaheim. If you look at a map, it's just outside of LA. It's part of that megalopolis that is kind of Orange County. And you're just surrounded by probably millions of people that are trying to make it in the movie, in the TV industry. And these people are coming from all over the country. And so you've got a supply and demand issue. Disney needs actors, people to put on costumes and spend the day bouncing around and, doing goofy noises and playing with kids and so on. I feel bad. I've heard the Captain Hook guy gets kicked in the shins quite a bit. The kids don't like him. So I'll admit it's probably a tough job. I mean, you get sunshine, heat, long day on your feet. You're, in this costume. The costumes stink. Other people wear them. I've heard people have had issues like picking up lice. I mean, it's not a fun job. I want to be clear. I mean, in some ways it's like, well, you get to dress up and pretend all day at Disneyland. Okay, good for you, But at the same time, I can see that it would be a difficult job. So this video is not about attacking unions, although I love doing that. And it's not about going after these Disney people. But I want to talk about kind of dynamics and trends that this just kind of brings to mind for me. But you're in a supply and demand problem here. You're in a situation, people are coming all over. They're trying to get jobs on television commercials and TV shows and movies. They're looking for anything. That whole area is just chock full of aspiring actors. And so Disney's got the pick of the litter. And a lot of people are like, hey, if I can't get a job working on a Netflix special, then, I'll see if I can't get a job over at Disney dancing around as a character from one of their movies. So, and you might say, well, Mike, those times have changed. It's not as much supply and demand as you think because there's not as many people wanting to get into acting. A lot of people just do YouTube like you do, sitting there in your wonderful air-conditioned studio in Charleston, South Carolina. Well, the fact of the matter is, even if you look at a lot of the popular YouTube channels, I mean, they are moving to California. They're going to LA. I mean, that's where it's at. You got New York and LA. Those are the two kind of key areas. So even if you're in the non-traditional, I'll call it media space, LA's still massive. All right, so it looks like they're going to get this thing. I looked at Disney. They seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, if you look at Disney Plus has been struggling. I don't want to get into their fortunes. But if you wrap it all into the overall Disney corporation, they seem to be growing. Disney doesn't break out their revenue by park. You've got your Florida operation. Those guys were unionized 40 years ago. But those tend to be full-time jobs down in Florida. That's a year-round destination, whereas the California one tends to be more seasonal and part-time. That's not to say that California isn't running a full-time gig there, but it's just that the Disney folks down in Florida, they've been unionized for 40 plus years, and that was like a full-time job. But if you look at Disney as a corporation, they seem to be doing well. Disney Plus, they got all their woke nonsense and they're shoving all that crap down your throat. Thank God for The Mandalorian, because if it wasn't for The Mandalorian, there would be no Disney Plus. That thing would be gone already. But in general, Disney does well, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars a day. It's crazy. It's crazy. So these folks are saying, hey, we want better. And funny enough, at this stage, and we'll talk about where this goes in a minute, at this stage, they're not saying we want an increase in income. They're saying we want schedule stability. We want full-time jobs. That's what they're saying. We can't make it on a part-time, wide-open schedule, available at any time status. Let's start getting me thinking about the kinds of jobs in the economy. Historically, in a free market economy, you've got different kinds of jobs. And there were certain jobs in the economy up until quite recently that were not expected to be full-time gigs. They didn't expect any type of expertise in labor, quality in labor. They didn't expect any availability. They were kind of, these are retail jobs. Like I did one. When I was a kid in high school, I worked at Sears in the paint department. I mixed paint. I helped customers, solve problems. Hey, I've got blistering paint on my house. Well, okay, you need an oil-based primer, and then you're going to put a latex over the top. You can't put oil over latex, but you can put latex over oil. All this kind of, here's the right kind of brush, and I'll mix up, this gallon of Tears of the Clown Blue or whatever, just crazy names. I worked the register, I stocked shelves, et cetera. I was making $3.10 in 1982, 83, around there. I graduated high school in 84. I worked there while I was in high school. Minimum wage at the time was $2.75. I was making $3.10. I was killing it. I was way above average, ladies and gentlemen. And minimum wage was $2.75. Now, I did the math on that. $2.75 in today's dollars is $8.62. So if you had a minimum wage that was equivalent back then, $2.75, it would be $8.62. However, that's 2004, and we are in the midst of a terrible, terrible inflationary economy right now, brought to you by Joe Robinette Biden. I'm going to get demonetized. So this is Biden's economy right now, lots of inflation. So if you back it off and go to 2019, right before the pandemic, $2.75 would have equaled $7.06. Right now it's $8.62, but just 3-4 years ago, it was $7.06. Where I'm going with that is to say it hasn't moved much. The federal level for minimum wage hasn't moved much. But there's an assumption in that number. And I'm going to talk about, there's a secret history. There's an aspect of minimum wage a lot of people don't know. And when we get to the close, I'm going to talk about this. It'll blow your mind. But if you go to other states, so the federal level is $7.25, but you have other states, New York, California. I think New York is at what? New York is at $16.28 for minimum wage. California is at $16 an hour for minimum wage. The highest area in the United States for minimum wage is Washington, D.C., coming in at $17 an hour. I'm here in the great state of South Carolina, and we're tracking with the federal. We're at $7.25, and a number of states are like that as well. Now, what's interesting, minimum wage was brought into play in 1933 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and like I said, we're going to get to some of that in a minute because I want to share why that was brought in. But you see all this discussion right now about minimum wage is not a living wage. You can't live on minimum wage. This doesn't work. You can't take care of yourself. You can't feed a family. You can't make your rent on minimum wage. And as I was saying a moment ago, in a free market society, you have different kinds of jobs, and there's certain jobs that were presumed to be the kinds of jobs you would get to take care of a family. And those weren't just white-collar jobs. Of course, you're looking for skilled labor, you're looking for trained people, you're looking for people with dependability and expertise and a schedule that allows for them to be committed to the work at hand. So this could be something, an attorney, an accountant, a very high-end, professionals. It could be office workers, administrative staff, but it could even be distribution, warehouse, and factory people that are shipping products, packaging, pick and package, doing assembly work. All of these kinds of jobs are full-time jobs with good wages. We expect that, like, you get a job. When I grew up in Rochester, New York, if you got a job with Kodak, working in one of their facilities, manufacturing or distribution or whatever it was, you'd do good. And Kodak wasn't even unionized. You could feed a family, you get bonuses and so on. But the other assumption was that if you're working at McDonald's or Burger King or Sears and Roebuck Company or Walmart, we didn't have Walmart in Rochester when I was a kid, but these type of retail, those were jobs that high school kids and college kids, and sometimes like moms looking for part-time work. Kids go off to school, mom wants to make a few bucks on the side, she works a part-time job. And there was just this expectation that there were certain jobs that fit. So you had this need in the economy for these low-skilled, kind of flexible, don't need to be full-time, not looking for all kinds of benefits. It would fit with the people in the society that were looking for that kind of work. There was a whole class of people looking for that. Now, I grew up working class, and in our family, you were just kind of taught, like, you get out and get a job. Like, that's what people do. You work, you'll get skills, you'll grow, you become more mature, you take on responsibility, you go on your own steam. What I've noticed, and I don't have a kind of a qualitative, like, this is good or it's bad. But what I've noticed is young people don't work these jobs very often. If you go into these historically part-time places, fast food restaurants, Chipotle, department stores and so on, you are not seeing teenagers, you're not seeing a crew of teenagers run by an adult or two like you would have 20 years ago. What you're seeing are people in their late 20s, early 30s, all the way up into their 40s. They're typically low-skill people. It seems like a lot of times these people are not college educated. Seems like it. I don't know. I'm not sitting there asking to see their papers. But it would seem that they're low-skilled people. They're not good at customer service. They've got bad attitudes. These are not people designed, I shouldn't say designed, but these are not people that are kind of like facing towards a career. But these are adults. These are adults. Often they have kids. They've got a car payment. They've got a $1,000 phone in their pocket. They've got rent to pay. I mean, these are people with responsibilities, and they're doing these more low-skilled, no-skilled jobs. And so what's going on in the economy is there's this shift where you've got all these people doing this, and it's creating an expectation. This is why you hear people say, well, this isn't a living wage. I can't live on this. It's like, yeah, you were never supposed to live on this. This wasn't designed to provide a living wage. The assumption was that when you were in a phase of life where you didn't need to have a living wage, you would do this because you would get training, expertise, and so on. And then you would continue to grow. And as you matured and got more experience, you would then eventually become someone who was making a living wage. Now, maybe you weren't an attorney. That's fine. You could be on a track to work in a warehouse and do fine. Yeah, you're not going to buy a 6,000 square foot lakefront property, okay? You're not going to drive a Bentley to your warehouse distribution job. But you could get married, you could raise kids, you could have a little house, you could mow your lawn, have a cold beer, soda pop, and watch the football game. Like that was the expectation. I don't know what's changed. And people can go, well, it's the capitalists. But I think there's something else going on. I don't want to try to tackle that because that's not what this is about. I just want to recognize there's been a dynamic shift. Now, what's happening now with these Disney folks is they're saying we want to unionize and we want to get better because we can't make a living. Well, you're living in supply and demand issues. As soon as you get full-time work, you're going to turn around and say, well, that's not good enough because even though I've got full-time work, I can't make ends meet. I mean, you live in California, you live in LA of all places, and you're surrounded by people willing to do that job cheaper. Even if you get a full-time job, you're surrounded by people willing to do that job cheaper. And of course, unionizing will protect you. from losing your job necessarily, but I can guarantee you they're not talking about wages today, but within a very short period of time, within a year, they'll be back at the table saying we need to have a wage increase. That even though I've got it full time now, maybe Disney takes that 1,700 employee group and consolidates. Maybe they bring some of these jobs together so they can give full time jobs to a fewer people. That group of fewer people that now are working full time, they're absolutely going to come back to the table and say we need to make more. I can't live on this, even though I'm working full time and I'm having to work part time on top of it. Well, yeah, you live in California. And what do you expect? So, and quite frankly, you're doing a low-skilled job. It's hard, like I said. I don't think this is a high-skilled job. Putting on a costume and dancing around, there is skill to it. Now, I know they have to learn dance routines, and I know there's aspects to it. But the skill that it requires to be this kind of character and do this work is not commensurate with making $150,000 a year, which is kind of what you need to live in California these days. So I'm not certain. They don't think. I mean, they're coming out and saying we want stability. We want Disney to give us more hours so that we can take care of ourselves. They know that's not the real battle. That's battle number one. That's going to lead to the next one, which is going to be a wage one. Let's wrap this up talking about minimum wage. I started talking about rates and et cetera. So I told you Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, brought in the minimum wage back in 1933, and it wasn't necessarily applied to everybody. I think it was like 25 cents an hour. But there's a secret about this a lot of people don't understand. I grew up thinking that the minimum wage was there to protect workers. You got to force employers to at least give them this much, because if you don't, employers just take advantage of people. What's interesting about this is minimum wage was pushed by progressives. Not a big surprise. Liberals and progressives like to make the world better. They're over there going, we're trying to create utopia. And if we could just get these greedy capitalists, these free market monsters to give up a nickel or two, everyone would do just fine. Why is this so hard? Why can't you guys just give a little bit of money? So I've always had the assumption that minimum wage was there to kind of elevate the income that people on the bottom rungs of the ladder could make. What's interesting, and this is documented, you don't have to go into conspiracy literature. These are real people, but progressives, like Midwestern progressives. For instance, a fellow named E.A. Ross, I think it was Edward A. Ross. He was an American sociologist, but he called himself a raceologist. He was a progressive sociologist in academia. He wrote a lot of papers, et cetera. His big thing, and a lot of progressives back then were into eugenics. This is the 1920s into the 30s, leading up to World War II. But this whole concept of purifying the race, of strengthening the race. We're going to take scientific thinking and apply it to humanity. And you got all this kind of riffraff in the gene pool. You've got these undesirables and these leeches on society. These are not my words, by the way. I'm just stating what these folks are saying. These progressives, like Margaret Mead, is it Margaret Mead or is it Sanger? Sometimes I get my names mixed up. I think it was Margaret Mead, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Anyway, now I'm demonetized for sure. These people were advocating for minimum wage. And here's why. You would think it's to help those at the bottom rung. They were upset that there was a strata of society, these kind of Orientals, they called them, E.A. Ross did, that don't have the desire to better themselves. They're happy to live in squalor. They're happy to just live at a low sub-American, subhuman level. And so the problem with these people is they're not contributing to society, they're taking from it, they're not motivated to do better, and they breed. These people have tons of children. What are we going to do? Oh no. They were talking about things like sterilization and et cetera. So the idea was with a minimum wage that if we bring in a minimum, it forces companies to hire a higher quality of worker. If we're going to force the company to pay 25 cents an hour, the company's going to say, well, then I'm going to look for workers that are worth 25 cents an hour. I'm not going to get some 5 cent an hour lazy bones who's leeching off of society and happy to just do a whole lot of nothing. I'm going to get somebody that's a higher quality worker. And so what they were trying to do by creating a minimum was to push out this undesirable kind of leech class, if you will, that were a drag on society. And their thinking was that if we make it impossible for these people to get work, impossible by raising the minimum wage, and driving more people into the workforce that are of a higher quality and pushing out the low quality people, that these people would not have as many children, either because they couldn't afford to or because they would turn to the government and say, hey, we need assistance. And the government could have turned around and said, we got you, fam, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure you don't have any more kids. We're going to sterilize you. It's horrible. I mean, it's like, but this was 1920s, 1930s thinking. And so this came out of the progressive movement. So what you see now as minimum wage, and we think of as a way to protect the workers, was really designed to eliminate a whole class of people. It did not succeed in doing that. And now what we have is what we're seeing with Disney and what we're seeing with all the sectors across the country that are really designed for part-time, low-skill work is, hey, this isn't a living wage. You know, we need the government, we need unions, we need to fight, we need to force people to pay us enough so that we can enjoy a lifestyle that we desire. There doesn't seem to be any discussion about, well, how do you better yourself? How do you get out of a low-paying job into a better job? What pathways and tracks are there for that? The only answer our society seems to have is like go into six-figure debt to go to college, and then you'll magically get a better job. We all know that that doesn't work. As a matter of fact, you've got a group right now. There's, what is it? It's in San Diego. There's a labor union. Labor unions in San Diego are calling for $25 an hour for service and hospitality workers. So this trend is not going to stop. There's going to be a demand for more and more money, that these low-skill, no-skill jobs provide a living wage to people. And essentially what you get, at the open I said, hey, in free market economies, you have different kinds of jobs that fit people in different circumstances, and not everybody needs a living wage, and you have jobs that match that. In a centrally planned economy, which is what we're kind of moving towards, everybody according to his ability, everybody to his need. It's communist, it's socialist, it's Marxist, meaning everybody works, they contribute, whether they contribute a lot or a little doesn't matter. We'll make sure that they get enough to get by. So all you have to do is work, and the state will take care of the rest. And funny enough, in America, we even bristle at the idea of having to work. So we'll see where that goes. I'm not making massive statements here. I think it's a fascinating dynamic. I think it deserves more attention. I'd love to know what you guys think. If you've been looking at this, what have been your experiences with part-time versus full-time work? What are your experiences with minimum wage? Even the tipping situation where you're having to give 30% tips now, or else you're going to get the stink eye from your server. Guys, this is really interesting to me. I appreciate you sticking in there. Do me a favor, leave a comment down below. I want to know what you think. And do me a favor, like and subscribe. I love each and every one of you, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Cheers.